It would have been hard to predict that Grand Theft Auto, a quaint top-down action-adventure that had decent but not amazing review scores, would become the biggest franchise in gaming. GTA 5 is the industry's best seller, second only to Minecraft, but predictions for the 6th installment, expected in 2025, are for it to be the most successful launch of all time. It'll do without doubt gangbusters for Rockstar, and from this standpoint will be a monumental high point in Grand Theft Auto's history. It's a far cry from the event that occurred 20 years ago that nearly tanked the franchise's standing all over the small matter of a cup of coffee. This is actually just water.
I'm in the nice bike. I move.
Help! Someone help!
What the hell is wrong with you?
It's easier to ask forgiveness than to get permission is a quote made famous by computer scientist and US naval officer Grace Hopper that weighs up the two and makes a decision to plow onwards with what you think is the right course of action. Rockstar president Sam Houser and his team had the same choice ahead of them in 2004 during the production of Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Thanks to court cases and injunctions, and we'll get to those, oh boy howdy will we ever get to those, some emails sent around the company at the time are accessible to the public. These have been collated wonderfully into the Who Spilled Hot Coffee article written by Simon Parkin for Eurogamer in 2012. In fact, it's probably fair to say that this is one of the most definitive pieces of writing on this story, largely because Rockstar are so secretive about it. But anyway, big credit goes to Eurogamer and Parkin. Oh, and hey look, we're on YouTube. This platform is plenty uncomfortable. In fact, more uncomfortable than my awkward British parents when it comes to talking about certain subjects, so please bear with me if I have to use some colourful language to get around the system. And speaking of the system, if you could like this video, that'd be very much appreciated, since we are at the mercy of our Lord and Master, algorithm. On the 14th of July 2004, Sam Houser sent an email to Rockstar's operations director, Jennifer Colby, that let her know of the lewd content that the devs intended to, and indeed at this point to at least some degree had, put into Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Houser was very frank in this message, matter-of-factly writing,
"To this end, in addition to the violence and bad language, we want to include sexual content, which I understand is questionable to certain people, but pretty natural, more than violence when you think about it, and consider the fact that the game is intended for adults."
And you know, to Sam's credit, he's not wrong. Nookie between consenting adults is normal and most of all legal, whereas a lot of GTA's other content is quite extreme. Not that it doesn't happen, but its levels of violence certainly aren't commonplace in most people's day-to-day lives. The problems, however, are deeply nuanced and rooted in society's comfort levels. All of our subscribers that grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s will know that it was an era where the most extreme things ruled supreme. It was loud, in your face, and obnoxious, like a Super Soaker commercial.
Super Soaker EES, electronic enhanced soakage.
South Park made animation as foul-mouthed as possible. Scream led the postmodern slasher revival to make graphic filmic violence feel more real than ever. Jackass showed a group of friends pushing their bodies and their bravery to the limit in outrageous stunts and pranks. All the while, Rumpy Pumpy was everywhere on TV and film, but not necessarily video games. It was one thing to see this content, it was another thing to take part in it. After all, video games at this point were still seen as a more immature form of entertainment. If you said video games to most people, they'd think Mario and Pikachu, not Gang Warfare Simulator where you can make the beast with two backs. That said, it's not like GTA hadn't broached the subject before for puns and double entendre. Hell, Vice City starred an adult film star and her director in a series of missions, but actual lurid activity was limited to off-screen moments and, cars rocking on their axles when picking up a lady of the night. The series had conquered foul language and graphic violence, so why not bonking? And so San Andreas was due to have a minigame where, after CJ's date invites him into their home, the player can partake in various bedroom scenes. The gameplay of these was minimal, button prompts and rocking the control stick back and forth until the so-called excitement bar was filled. The concept, according to email exchanges, was supposed to star CJ's girlfriends in their underwear, although at one time or another the team also created nude models of the characters too. The problem truly, however, is that Houser's email to Colby was sent in July when the game was already announced for an October release date. This meant he was informing her of this content 3 months before the street date. Either this was a last-minute idea, or Sam had hoped that blindsiding the parts of the company that had to consider the impact of this decision would allow it to pass through. Unfortunately, it was a pretty cut-and-dry decision from Colby, who told Hauser that ultimately the ESRB would be likely to change the game's rating from a mature to adult only, meaning that the majority of game retailers wouldn't even stock the title, potentially losing out on 80% of the game's revenue. Despite Hauser protesting that the suggested cut would damage his vision for pushing the envelope, he was forced to acquiesce. However, development on the minigame had already begun, and untangling it from the rest of San Andreas could be disastrous. Such was the nature of the game's complex code, outright removing it could cause the programming to fall apart around the gap. Developing the minigame before getting sign-off on what could or perhaps could not be shown was the mistake that everything else cascades from, and it left the Rockstar North team with precious few options. It was ultimately decided to make the minigame inaccessible to the player but leave it on the disc as, in Hauser's words,
"The impact of yanking something late is too scary."
That's what she said.
This might not be the only reason he left it in, but we'll get to that. But the issue is this was deliberate ignorance to the undeniable truth that modders would find this code in the game. It's not like Grand Theft Auto didn't already have an active modding scene that Rockstar themselves were a part of, even going so far to assist some creators directly. People had been modding Vice City since its PC release, like adding different vehicles, entirely new missions, or turning landmarks of the city into locations for Tommy Vercetti to purchase. This last one, turning the marina into a 40-car parking garage, was the work of Patrick Wildenborg. Wildenborg, a gamer from the Netherlands, didn't have a PlayStation 2 at the time of San Andreas' launch, which came to the console 8 months before Windows. As such, PC modders like Patrick W, as he was known online, spent time inspecting the PS2's game's internals through a code viewer. One modder, Barton Waterduck, made a discovery that at first didn't seem all that surprising. There were animations in the game with various adult acts as their names. Some of these acts can actually be seen, although not in any explicit fashion, in the background of some cutscenes performed by NPCs. However, these could be displayed on character rigs and then full models of the main character, confirming that lewd acts had been programmed into the game at some point. Patrick W spent the next few months digging into the wider code for San Andreas for instances where these animations might crop up, discovering that they weren't unused older cut ideas, as many had first suspected, but did indeed still lurk within what made up the final version of the game. With the PS2 release being much harder to mod, however, it meant waiting for the PC port to arrive in June 2005, and staying quiet about the discovery until then to see how Rockstar intended to proceed. Whilst it's not as simple as it sounds, the months between the PS2 version going gold and the PC release could have given Rockstar a chance to do something about the potentially controversial content in the code. That is to say, untangle and remove it. That was never the intention, however. Internal emails from the time show that Sam Hauser hadn't given up on pushing the envelope. Leslie Benzies, one of the 3 figureheads of the company, assured his colleague,
"We will get the stuff back in the way it was."
The plan, allegedly, was to release the game as it was with its mature rating, but then to offer an optional free adult-only patch to unlock the, How's Your Father minigame down the line, therefore having both their cake and eating it too when it came to the game's sales and content. Hauser described this planned patch as unlocking the darkness, which was some pretty powerful foreshadowing for what was about to happen next. In June of 2005, the PC version of the game was released, and the hot coffee mod came almost instantly alongside it. Patrick Wildenborg remarks that the process of toggling the blocked minigame back on took all of about 15 minutes. He sent the edited script over to a friend in the US who had a copy of the game, as the European release was still 3 days out, and sure enough, the truth of the animations was revealed. Patrick saved this trigger into a mod which he dubbed Hot Coffee, a reference to CJ's potential love interest inviting him back into their home for a cup of coffee, and the mod went live on June 9th, 2005. Later that same day, Sam Hauser discovered that his lurid little minigame had been discovered and made available online. According to the aforementioned Eurogamer article, he attempted to call Rockstar's New York office, but nobody answered, as staff had apparently been told not to answer the phone. Others in the company were clearly also in the know and battening down the hatches. This was coming at a pretty crucial time, as Take-Two Interactive, Rockstar's parent company, had just come to the conclusion of a 2-year legal case over the company's apparently improper sales records, having been ordered to pay $7.5 million in penalties. They barely had time to breathe out before the next storm came their way.
Oh, shit. Here we go again.
The first 2 weeks following the mode's upload were pretty positive, as game news outlets covered it, and it got so popular that downloads of the mod crashed the website that it was uploaded to. But then, of course, the ESRB caught notice, and they were not very happy. Wildenborg was inadvertently at the centre of gaming's biggest controversy, as the man who had supplied the internet with the keys to Rockstar's dirty secrets. Understandably, he declined the constant barrage of requests for interviews from the media, some of whom even apparently camped outside his house. Patrick W., alongside removing the download link, permanently left a statement about hot coffee on his website for all to see that still exists to this day.
But all this material is completely inaccessible in an unmodded version of the game. It can therefore not be considered a cheat, Easter egg, or hidden feature, but it's probably just leftover material from a gameplay idea that didn't make the final release. I would really like to stress that this material is only accessible after willfully applying the hot coffee mod or something similar to the game.
Unexpectedly, Rockstar got in direct contact with Patrick to thank him for his statement, in the middle of the night of course due to the time difference, which went some way to absolve them of their wrongdoing, or at least didn't aggressively paint them in a negative light. Whilst this was probably a very surreal moment for the modder, things only got weirder the very next day, as Rockstar used this goodwill against him and threw Patrick and the likes of him under the bus. The company gave a statement on the situation, essentially blaming modders for the scandal, saying,
"Since the hot coffee scenes cannot be created without intentional and significant technical modifications and reverse engineering of the game's source code, we are currently investigating ways that we can increase the security protection of the source code and prevent the game from being altered by the hot coffee modification."
Significant technical modifications? By Patrick's own volition, the mod had taken less than 15 minutes to switch on. The press were immediately and rightfully suspicious of Rockstar's claims, because San Andreas had only been out 2 days by this point, and that is not enough time for someone to create near-nude character models, animations, and the framework for the minigame. The ESRB wasn't convinced either. On July 20th, they officially changed the game's rating from mature to adults only. As predicted, most American retailers refused to stock the game. This was also the case in Australia, which didn't have a rating higher than MA15+, so the game was labelled as refused classification. And here in the UK, nothing happened actually. San Andreas was already rated an 18, which, you know, how much more adults only can you get than adults only? In the following weeks, the developers returned to San Andreas' code and stripped all of the offending content out so that the game could be rated once more as mature. A PC patch went out that August, and the game was re-released for consoles in September. If you're in America, feel free to check your copy of San Andreas. If your disc has 2nd edition on it, you have the re-rated version. If not, congratulations, you're holding hot coffee in your hands. The re-rating was the first blow of many to come, but is estimated to have lost the company upwards of $30 million in sales. Of course, it only got worse, because then the legal troubles started. The biggest and most famous of these was drawing the ire of future presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. She teamed up with the head of the Democratic Leadership Council, Evan Bayer, I apologize if I pronounced that wrong, and Joe Lieberman, a politician that you might know had been a big part of the anti-violent video game brigade in the 90s that actually led to the creation of the ESRB. Together, they demanded that the policies of the Video Game Ratings Board be federally enforced under what they called the FEPA, or FEPA, or Family Entertainment Protection Act, with proposed punishments including fines and community service for those who knowingly sold adult entertainment to minors. This never actually got through legal proceedings, but Hillary Clinton bringing the fight to Grand Theft Auto did have a lasting impact. That is to say that GTA 4's Statue of Happiness holding a cup of coffee high above Liberty City certainly bears a striking resemblance to her. Whilst their FEPA proposal failed, their demand for an FTC investigation led to meetings in January 2006 between Rockstar and the Federal Trade Commission, which is where most of these internal emails come from, as Sam Houser and his colleagues were examined under a microscope. The FTC eventually declared that Take-Two Interactive were deceptive in their marketing of the game, but didn't fine Rockstar. Instead, they basically wagged their finger at them and said, "Don't do it again," promising civil fines of up to $11,000 for any and every further violation. Unfortunately, the company still had to deal with class action lawsuits, such as those from the city of Los Angeles, attorneys claiming claiming that Take-Two Interactive had committed consumer fraud, and the one from the old granny who had bought the video game for her grandson and then was mad that this crime simulator had a hanky-panky minigame somewhere on the disc that he presumably couldn't even access. Yep. That happened. Shareholders were also very upset as Take-Two's revenue and stock were cut in half at best. The company settled all of these suits out of court to the tune of $20 million. They also, in a move that seems positively snarky now, made it possible for any upset parties to exchange their original disc for a re-release or refund it for $35. Apparently, the final report of this amounted to less than 3,000 returns out of over 12 million sales, perhaps proving that people were less genuinely upset and more interested in taking advantage of the situation to squeeze the company for money. It took up to 5 years before all of these cases were finalised, finally putting an end to some of the most stressful years in the company. The controversy was so big that the BBC even made a docuseries out of it called The Game Changers, starring Daniel Radcliffe as Sam Houser and Bill friggin' Paxton as Jack Thompson, which is far cooler than that guy ever deserves.
Game over, man. It's game over.
Rockstar called the show random made-up bollocks in a Twitter post after it aired, but beyond this you won't get many actual quotes out of the company's employees about anything even remotely related to hot coffee, as it seems to be no laughing matter for them. Whilst arguably they were never in true financial worry, the impacts that the decision to leave the boinking minigame in San Andreas could have had on gaming at large had the potential to be massive. If FEPA had passed, for one thing, GameStop employees could be doing community service for selling little Johnny a copy of Fable. Also, just the wider cracking down on gaming attempting to grow as a medium would have negatively affected the confidence of other developers. The damage done to Rockstar's reputation, and I'm sure the mental health of the people who worked there at the time, has made the topic something very few ever want to bring up again. Afraid that claiming ownership of the minigame might reignite the controversy maybe, but also, the stink of the press statement where Rockstar lied about the origins of the game and passed it off on their fans, just still wafting in the air. Corey Wade, a senior product manager at Rockstar, said in an interview in 2007,
"Blaming it on hackers was a colossal PR screw-up. It was a complete disaster. They lied."
Rockstar pointing the finger at a portion of their audience for their stupid slip-up was an incredibly short-sighted and damaging claim. It divided and confused the feelings of the until then healthy GTA modding scene. Journalist and author of Jacked, the outlaw story of Grand Theft Auto, David Kushner, described in a CNET interview that San Andreas modders felt scared to experiment with their new favourite game. Rockstar had lied about hot coffee, so who's to say that their perfectly innocent mods wouldn't also get them dragged into this mess. It took some time for people to get comfortable with modding San Andreas, which was completely understandable as nobody knew if this was an isolated incident. Rockstar had had a very good relationship with their modding community, which had helped the GTA PC scene blossom into something really special. It was forever changed after this. The company was no longer able to offer help to those looking to edit in-game files. Still, the company should be happy that this occurred in 2004, when the ubiquity of the internet and online attitudes were very different to how they are in 2024. In 2004, Rockstar was able to hunker down, develop and release the likes of Bully and GTA 4, and people eventually got over things amidst their hype for the new games. As far as I can tell, they never released a statement apologising for trying to pass the blame onto their own community. They just hoped that people would forget, and they did. Today, that might not be the case, as social media wouldn't let people forget, and Rockstar would be hounded until they said something. Everybody loves a big Twitter post apology thing. CD Projekt Red. CJ's boot-knocking minigame was never designed to titillate, more to entertain. Think comedies like American Pie. The interactivity and the rather unfortunate inclusion of nude character models is what whipped up the controversy. It was too big of a jump. And of course, what's funny is that the revolution for acceptance of bedroom antics in video games was just on the horizon. Mass Effect in 2007 caught a little bit of controversy for nudity, but its scenes were largely accepted to be tasteful and good character pathos just 3 years later. Heavy Rain, in another 3 years, has one of AAA gaming's first quote-unquote interactive heavy petting scenes. As much as any of Heavy Rain is interactive, perspective anyway, but not much different to San Andreas' attempts. Attitudes towards these things are always changing. In particular, bumping uglies in video games has come a long way, especially when it's done in ways that don't feel exploitative. Even Heavy Rain's scene, as painfully awkward as it is to watch, had some degree of direction to make it feel less voyeuristic and more just a natural part of the story. GTA's was more just flat camera angles and no grace whatsoever. Whether you think it's ridiculous that society has such a problem with the no pants dance in video games or not, it was on Hauser to approach it with care. Had he prepared a pitch for the minigame earlier into production and worked with other parts of the team on finding an acceptable middle ground, it might have made it into the final product, at least in some fashion. Something clever that used camera angles to imply but definitely push the envelope and was actually funny instead of dead-faced 2004 character models staring at you as they gyrated against each other. GTA could have continued its run of being cutting edge, but Hauser's decision to try and rush the minigame past his peers crippled its chances and hurt GTA in the long run. If you're looking at it with a glass half full, you could say that San Andreas was the barometer for what not to do, and it's why games that preceded it were able to push the boundary that GTA absolutely crumpled in front of. GTA 4 didn't dare to try the approach again though, and GTA 5 only really played catch-up with the groundwork that the rest of the industry had now laid down. And 2025's upcoming Grand Theft Auto 6 stars a pair of protagonists in a committed relationship with each other, so maybe it's time for Rockstar to fill up their coffee mugs and try again. Perhaps with a little more care and consideration, and a lot less blaming your fans over your screw-up. That's the good stuff.